Well, welcome everybody to yet another installment of our open book tour. I am really excited about having Garriott Antonacci here because I have been a fan of hers for at least 20 years when I started collecting, and I really know nothing about her backstory, and neither does Google. Facebook is right out. So we will get to, I think that she mentioned that there are some secrets in here that she will share with us. So in addition to her wonderful, small, exquisite miniature books, we will have a real treat in a store for us today. So thank you for coming, and here is Sam.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks very much. Thanks, everyone, for coming and all your support. Especially thanks to Cynthia and the museum for having this venue for book artists and these collections. It's just so great for us as artists to have this place. So, yeah, again, thank you all for coming. And I admitted to Cynthia that I'm a little intimidated showing my small work here in the presence of so many of my heroes, but having said that, here we go. And like she said, I have a little bit of personal work here that I thought I would share just to give you some of my backstory and let you know how I got started. And so I'm Sam Garriott Antonacci. I make primarily one-of-a-kind, but a few limited edition books. And I work generally pretty small. It's been getting a little bit bigger as I go along, but I was raised on a farm in the Midwest in the Ohio River Valley, very rural background. The farm's been in my family for 200 years. My sister still lives there and they farm it. So having a rural background, it was really, there was a lot of solitude and there was a lot of nature, and those things really I think informed my work, but they also gave me this longing, this desire to travel and see the world, which was something I didn't do as a child. So many of my books are based on travel. I love maps, I love stamps, because they were these little glimpses into an exotic foreign land or another place I'd like to travel. So, and I also love illuminated manuscripts. I became really enamored with the beauty and the detail and the visual storytelling that is such an old art form. And that also informs my work. So I came to Seattle after I graduated. I went to Indiana University in Bloomington and got a history degree, women's studies. I thought I was going to be a lawyer and, you know, fight for civil rights, women's rights, social justice, that kind of thing. But before I went to law school, I wanted to travel. So I moved across the country, sight unseen, to Seattle, fell in love with it. I think I had $90 and a Volkswagen or something when I got to town. But, you know, started, the idea of law school was kind of, you know, just kind of went away, and I decided I wanted to go to art school. So I worked as a lot of different things to kind of earn money. I was a woodworker, a house painter. I did scrimshaw in a little scrimshaw. This is how long ago it was when people actually were doing that, but very Northwest themes there. That's the totemic art, the Native American art, the eagles and ships and whales, you know, that whole scrimshaw tradition also really informed my work, because the artists that I worked with there in this little shop were just some terrific people, and Charles Emerson, who teaches at the Gage Academy. He was a Fulbright scholar and a wonderful painter. Gene Emmons, who is a really well-known botanical illustrator who lives out on Vashon Island. We all were in this little room, you know, for 8 hours a day just drawing. So I think that's also one of the reasons why I like to work with scratchboard so much, because it's very graphic and you kind of etch it away. So in any case, I went to the Burnley School, which was a commercial arts school, because I needed to make a living. So I've had a day job for all these years in graphic arts to support my habit of of artist books. And so how everything kind of changed for me in a weekend was a friend of mine and I took a class at the University of Washington. It was Mayor Blocker, whose work is here. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Mayor's work. And she taught us 3 bindings in 2 days. And I was just blown away. I wasn't familiar with artist books. I'd never really seen one. I didn't know what they were. But I became completely enamored during that weekend. And so the 3 bindings were, we learned an accordion fold, we learned a case binding, and we learned a piano hinge. Well, I've done those bindings for 20 years, 25 years. Those have been like the mainstay. I really should break out and learn a few more things. So that's on my list of things to do. And then I took a box making class from Carolina Veenstra, who some of you probably know, to learn this form of the clamshell box. Because when you work as small as I do, you don't want to just send your little books out naked into the world. You feel like they need a little bit of protection. So the clamshell was a good tool for that. And so that's been also a thing that I've used pretty consistently in my work. For about the first 4 or 5 years after I took this class, I just did blank books, journals, you give them away, that kind of thing. But the thing that really changed me and my direction was a friend of mine who was a wonderful artist. He developed cancer and he was going into, he was an artist, he didn't have any health insurance, and he was doing all of his chemo and his radiation and everything at the public health hospital. Just a really great guy, and just never a dark word. He just kept making art right up until the end. In any case, I had this little book that I made for him, and my idea had been this was long ago when, I don't know if you guys remember like at Fred Meyer, the photo booth places where for $1 you get the 4 little photos. So I was going to have all of the people who loved him, get their photo, and we would put it in this little book and we would give it to him. So when he had to go in for chemo, he could put it in his pocket and he would just have a little reminder of everyone who really cared about him. Well, what he did, he kind of turned the table on me, and I went over, I gave it to him for Christmas, and I went over a week or so later, and he said, I took that little book that you gave me, and I put some of my own artwork in it. And so this is really tiny. I'll pass it around so that you can see. But he did these little almost sumi wash illustrations of these figures that are just leaping and dancing and running, and they're so alive, and they're just so powerful to me. Again, this is my personal story with him, my association with him, but they're just, they're strong, and it really turned a light on in my head, and it seems like it should be really obvious, right? If you're making a book, you can put whatever you want in it. But up until that point, I had not really gotten that. So when I saw this little book, which he passed away a couple months later, so the book did come back to me, but it was like, I can do whatever I want with these books. I can put anything I want, whatever I feel like drawing or painting or anything. And so, like I say, as obvious as that may sound, this is the book that really, set me off on this little path. So I'll pass that around just so that you can see, because it's, like I say, it's a very tiny object, but I feel like it was the first time that I ever felt that something so small could have such a strong power or such a strong connection with someone. And I still, to this day, maintain a very strong connection with my friend, even though he's been gone for over 20 years. But his work and his spirit and his life, I feel like, still live on in that little book. So that's where I got started. Once I started doing that, then I thought, well, I can do anything I want. And I had this desire to kind of go back and look at where I had grown up. I was so anxious to get out of there that, but it's good sometimes to go back and look at where you came from. So I started doing a few books that kind of document the farm that I grew up on. And so it opens, the little gate, and then inside is the farm that I grew up on, the house where my father was born, my grandfather was born, my great-grandfather was born, the barn, the silos, and then this house where I grew up, which is up here. My parents built a newer house. But it's hard to show this. And then in the tunnel, I'll pass this around again too. There are little items that were just important to us as kids growing up. The mailbox, which, that's where you got all your communication from. The Martin house, where the purple martins were, the honeysuckle, the cattle. So this was kind of the first farm book that I did, and I'll show you a couple more. If you don't. And I brought these along just because, again, these kind of just show a dummy style of working it out with Xeroxes and hand-lettered kind of funky bindings, trying different kind of bindings. But this is a little book, Southern Indiana, and it has scratchboard illustrations of the farm. The barn, Homer's barn, different things in the landscape. Once I started doing that, then I really started getting into maps and doing maps. So the next book that I did is this book called Domicilia. And this is a book that's a map of all the places that I've lived since I left the farm. And so it folds out like a map. It shows the farm here and then the trajectory of all the different places that I've lived, ending up at my house in Madrona where I live now. But again, they're very personal documents, but I like having them because I feel like they just speak to a personal history that I have. And because I do have a history degree, when I was getting that degree, I always loved the personal stories, like the journals and the biographies and autobiographies, much more than the bigger, broader. I liked the smaller versions of that. So you can pass that around. And documenting as far as places that I've lived also, this is a book, one of the first ones I made, called Le Petite Atelier, and this was my first studio that I had in Seattle. And it was a converted garage on an alley over in Eastlake. And so this is an accordion fold. I think this might be one of the accordion folds I made in Mayor's class, in the first class. And accordion folds are great because they're easy to display. You can show the whole trajectory of the book, whereas it's a case bound, well, you can see one spread at a time. So I love accordion folds, especially for, exhibitions or everything, because people can really see them what they are. But this book has it shows the outside. Well, I have to do it like this. It shows the outside of the studio in the alley and all the myriad hundreds of cats that lived in that alley. And then when you flip it this way, it becomes the inside of the studio. And I've realized too, there are artifacts in here from other artists in Seattle who, as we've all slowly been forced out of our workspaces, like Carl Smool. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but this is one of his hangings that I bought at the sale that he had when he was having to move out of his studio in Belltown. And my friend Roger Schreiber, he was forced out down on Boren of his studio because of Amazon. Anyway, so there's these little touches in here. And this place, of course, no longer exists. It's completely been razed, and it's a big box apartment building now. But again, I love having this little document of different places.
Maybe you could send some.
Going this way, sure, absolutely, good idea. Thank you. Yeah. And again, so I'll just pass these around, but this is a travel book of scratchboards with a map of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico from a trip. They're just really little glimpses of moments in time on travel. I'm not a writer. My work is very figurative, but I like having just little kind of mementos. And when I look at drawings that you've done in a certain place, you can kind of remember where you were, what the smells were, what it sounded like, how they, it's like a little time travel for me, a lot of these books. And the last one I'll show here is this is like a travel journal, and it's not, I didn't make this book, this is just a commercial sketchbook, but I did a 3.5-week road trip all through the American Southwest with a friend of mine, and for some reason we were calling ourselves the Blackjack Gang. I don't know why, because there were only 2 of us, but I did this, it's the Blackjack Gang Commemorative book of stamps. And so it's a sketchbook that just is full of little maps, stamps of our adventures on the road. I didn't take photos, but I had sketchbooks, so you do little drawings of just different places. And I worked on this over a number of years, but this is the kind of thing that I like to just work on when I'm not really working on anything. I just, you just want to be in the studio doing something. So I think things like this are just really fun to keep your hand in. And again, it's a personal historical document, because really all of these are just small documents. So now I'll move over into the work that is here at the museum. And all of this work Cynthia has collected through the exhibitions that we've had at the Bainbridge Arts and Crafts. Now it's called the Art Project, but it was formerly the gallery. And so pretty much everything that's here has been something that was done with a theme in mind, because the gallery would call you and say, we're going to do we're going to do a show about bugs. And you just get a parameter and you kind of can do whatever you want within that theme. I think this actually was from one of the bugs exhibitions. And this is a book of Emily Dickinson, a poem with a little, let's see, which way does it go? With a couple of little pop-up butterflies that stand out, yeah. And this one I actually did do an edition, I think, of, but my editions are very small. It's like 5. There was one of this Seattle Skyline. This is one of the first editions that I did, and it's a miniature Seattle Skyline, but it is so old, the kingdom's in it, And I think I did an edition of 25 of this. This was definitely the biggest edition that I've ever done. And I've had a number of friends, they're always after me, why don't you just print your books out on the computer? And, you could do big editions and everything. But that's just not for me. The process of making the book, drawing the book, binding the book, it's more about that work than it is about mass producing. So, I'm sorry, yes. Oh, go ahead.
Can you describe a little bit of how the cutout works?
Well, it's done by hand. I mean, I just use an
All by
X-Acto knife.
Really?
Yeah. And
Which one?
yeah. Now, I know some people who, if I gave them files, they could probably die cut something like this for me. And in the future, that might be something that I might consider doing, because I love the little pop-ups and the little elements of things that you can do with die cuts. But all of these have been hand cut. This comes in a box as well that we don't have it here, but Amy was kind enough to get these 2 books, the 500 handmade books by Lark Books, and I think the Skyline book has a box, which we'll want to, maybe we can remedy that. But, and these LARC books are really great. I would recommend them to anybody who is interested in making books or exploring books, because they really show you the wide variety and scope of all the different things that book artists are doing across the country. And there seems like there's a little bit of a revival or an interest in artist books over the course of the last few years. So these LARC books I would recommend for anybody who's interested. Going back to travel, a number of these books that Cynthia has collected are travel related. This is a book that's called Nightfall in Venice. And so again, it has a little clamshell box. It also has a little panel that pops down that's got just a little nightfall sky. No, this is a giclée print. It's acrylic on arches, and then again it's cut out. The book is a map book, so it's small, very small, but when you open it, it folds out into a map.
Could you do that again?
You bet. Well, I love the idea that there's something that's so tiny, so you don't. I like to have a little surprise whenever you can, and so it just opens and it just folds out just like a map would, and then it folds down. So it's got the map and a little illustration that's also a variation of the pop-up that pulls down. And this book has been really fun.
And you separated the panels so that they fold and
yes,
don't
and
get thick, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the tricky thing too for me is that there's this. Do you guys ever find that materials that you get really attached to, all of a sudden you can't get them anymore? Oh, yes. So this paper I love because it's perfect. It's really strong and durable, but I can't find it anymore to buy it. Dan Smith used to carry it. Now they don't. So I found a little stash in my studio a little while ago, and I was like, oh, here's another little bit of this paper. But anyway, I don't want to become a hoarder of art supplies, but sometimes I'm tempted when there are things that I can't find. So this is a travel book of Venice. Sure, absolutely. And these are a couple that are Southwest oriented. I love the American Southwest to travel. I wouldn't want to live there, but I love to go down there. And they had a show, I think it was called The Night Sky, at the gallery. And so these are a couple of accordion fold books. This one is called Desert Moon. And so it's just a night sky that's very simple, and I love Arches Black too, and just Arches 88. They're really nice papers to work with, so I use those a lot. I love Prismacolors as well, so I use Prismacolors a lot. So there's one, and then this other one is called Shooting Star. So it's kind of, they're kind of a, let's see. Yeah, sorry. Wasn't sure if I had it upside down. But it's a similar, just a night landscape.
How did you create the light behind the building?
That I have an airbrush that I use that I really love, because you can do really great tonal things. The Arizona sketchbook, the Blackjack game, I've used the airbrush, all through that, because it's just a little shot of color, but it gives you a nice tonal gradation. So that's what I used on both of these for that night sky. And the last kind of Southwest book that I'll show you, I've gotten into movable parts a little bit. I like magnets, and I like I said, I like to have things that are kind of fun. So this is Sonoran Nightfall. It's also kind of a variation. I like night. And it is a little scene of the desert sky, but it has this pickup truck that's on a magnet. that can kind of just fly around wherever you want it to go. And I think the first time I showed this to someone, maybe at the university, and they said, "That's an interactive piece." And I said, "Well, it's kind of a toy." That's how I look at it. It's kind of a toy. Well, yeah, I guess it is interactive too. But anyway, so a lot of the things I make are just things that I want to have fun with, right? That I think are fun. And so to me, a little pickup truck flying through the desert sky. And I had a friend who moved to Germany, and she had a frame chopper in her basement that she couldn't take with her. So I ended up buying it, and that's what has given me this new little direction of these kind of more prosceniums or almost shadow box type books, because you can have a depth to it. They're not quite as flat, and I can do any custom size that I want, and so you'll see more of that kind of treatment there. And this is a map of Snoqualmie, which is a map of the Snoqualmie River Valley here, and same kind of thing, same kind of treatment where it's in this frame, but this little flock of geese, ooh, they can come down, they can go through the sky, you can just play around with them, put them wherever you want, and I have a lot of fun when I'm making these. It's just, is it great art? Is it, does it say something to the world? But to me, it's just like, let's just have some fun with books. It's that's my modus operandi, really. There are so many great artists out there that are doing such strong work as far as social issues and politics and everything, and I have so much respect for people that do that kind of work. My work is something that's different from that, but I think that it's still good to have fun.
How did you think of using the magnet? When did that penny drop?
I was in Italy, and I think we were in Florence, and I saw bought one, these little proscenium. They were like little theaters, and they had little characters that were on magnets, and you could move them around in these little theater scenes, and that's when I was like, oh, that's so fun. I would love to do something like that. And then, I stole it, basically, in Italy. I saw it in Italy.
How did you find the right magnets? Because I know it's hard to find the right bit.
Yeah, I just looked around. There's a place, Tap Plastics, that's down on 9th Avenue. And they have, it's kind of hit and miss with them. Sometimes they have what you want, sometimes they don't. But that's mostly where I've gotten them. And you can also buy, I haven't used it yet, but I might try it. I'm just worried about that it's not very archival. I don't know how long it would last. But there's that magnetic tape that you can buy that's adhesive on one side. And it comes in rolls, but I have not yet used that. So mostly mine are just they're just little flat magnets. I've gotten into some wider ones that I'll show you.
They're rare earth magnets, aren't they?
Yes, I think so, yeah. I don't know if you want to see this. This was for a show at the gallery. And again, it's the book opens up, but the illustration folds out and up into, so this was a scratch board illustration. This is a giclée print of it, but, and then I can airbrush acrylic color over you etch away the white, and then you can put color back in if you want. And like I said, I just love how graphic scratchboard is. I know it's not a medium that a lot of people use, I don't think, but for me it's been really, really a fun medium. And so I do a lot of it. These two books are both scratchboard, Totem Box and Totem Masks of the Pacific Northwest. These were both done for box shows at the gallery. I think boxes was the theme. And these speak directly to my short experience doing scrimshaw, because I took these designs from designs that we had actually done in the shop, in the studio there, and the masks. And so this one is a double accordion fold that folds out. And these are giclée prints of scratchboard drawings of different animals: loon, wolf, serpent, bear, raven, and eagle. And as I was doing these drawings, they actually relate to different mentors that I've had over the years, and a few of them are the people that I did scrimshaw with, and one is a good friend of mine, and I'll show you some of her work here in a minute. The Raven, the trickster, she's a lifelong friend, another artist, and again, I felt like I need to get out of my accordion rut, because I just do accordion folds. So let's do a reverse accordion fold. Let's try to break it up a little bit and do some different things. And the second one is based on the myth of Raven releasing the sun. And so the sides of the box open. They're held together with the lid. And then this is I call this a snake binding because it kind of folds both ways. It's very snaky. And then the names of each figure is on the back. Bear, loon, serpent. They're the same drawings, but these are the originals. So these are all the scratchboard drawings. So I think this one came first. And then I did the giclée prints and did the other reverse accordion fold for that. But again, I like this kind of snaky binding because it has a certain movement to it.
Sam, what is in there between your panels?
These are, this is pieces of book cloth that is like double backed. And then there are two boards. I'll pass it around so you can see, but there are two boards, a book board and a book board, and then the book cloth is in between. So that's what gives you that flexibility. And
Like those little snakes when we were kids.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that kind of come apart and yeah. So
I love the drop-down box. This is cool too.
it's fun. Once we I kind of got away from the shows at the gallery that had to do with travel. Then there were more just kind of generic themes that the gallery gave us. That David, this is a book called Scarab Box, and I haven't looked at this for a long time. This was for another bug show, I think, and because that was David. They like that theme. So it has a scarab beetle on the outside, and then it opens to reveal more of a bigger, more bejeweled scarab. That several of these books, this was a piece. A lot of times it's something that I've already been working on in the studio. I've been working on this scarab drawing just for fun because I wanted to. And then David called and said we're going to do a beetle theme or a bug theme. And so that's when I was like, well, maybe I could use that scarab box. But I like the opening, something opens and it opens a little bit more, giving it more of a I don't know if it's a mystery, but a little bit more anticipation, I guess the word is there. And so, yeah, these books were just various themes. I think this is a book called A Limerick, and I'm trying to remember what the theme was for this book. I think it was just books. Sometimes the themes would just be very general. So this book was actually fueled by a night in the south of France with a bunch of friends and some wine and a long dinner. And one of the guests at the table, he was retired, but he was a James Joyce scholar from Dublin, and somehow everyone started telling limericks, and they got bluer and bawdier, and everyone was throwing in their limericks, and so this is a limerick, but it's a much more G-rated version of one of the limericks that I learned from him, and it is, once I went to see Victor Hugo, and he told me there's one thing I do know, while painting is fine, and music divine, it's the book that is numero uno. So, thanks.
I like the way that you just take
Oh, I put that in backwards, but
small, little, precious books and then make them even more important with an exquisite book.
oh, well, thanks. Like I said, I feel like they need the protection of the box. This was also a book that was done from the book exhibit, and this is a book called Sanctuary. This was a chance to put all my favorite things in one place, and so this is just a 2-panel bifold book of a library, and then of course I put books, if you read the titles, books that have been important to me are kind of interspersed throughout. I went to an artist book conference back in Boston a number of years ago, and I met a book artist there, and the books that he made, he would go into someone's house and he would spend a week or whatever, several days, and he would write down all of the titles of all of the books that were in that house. And his idea was that you could make a portrait of that person based on what books were on their shelves. And he said, there's no editing, you can't hide anything, your self-help books, anything, everything has to be out. And I thought it was just a great idea to have a kind of a portrait of someone based on the books that are on their shelves, because I always like to browse people's bookshelves and see what kind of things they're reading, and see, do you have something in common, because you obviously like the same writers or whatever. So this Sanctuary book is based on that idea.
Is it just a standard scratch board tool that you use?
Well, this actually is, yeah, it is just a basic scratch board. This is a scratch board book that I did. We used to have an old wooden boat. We spent a lot of time on it. So all these scratch boards were actually done on Puget Sound and Lake Union, because you could just take the scratch board with you and just draw whenever you had a minute. So this is a book called Dreaming of Cousteau, and again, it's figurative illustrations of just various marine life, nautical pieces, and then I've gone in them with the airbrush and overlaid color on top of the black and white scratch board. And so these, again, like I said, they've just been so much fun to work on. That's kind of basically my whole premise is, have fun when you're making books. Fun with books.
They're getting a little larger.
They are. You'll notice they're kind of sneaking up in size. We start out very tiny. I've been trying to break out, like I said, a little bit of the always being working so small. And I've had people ask me, why do you work so small? Well, one is that I don't have a huge workspace. I mean, I work in a large former bedroom up in my upstairs of my house is where I work, but it has really high ceilings. It has skylights, so I have really nice north light. It's like heaven in there to go in there, and it's raining on the skylights, and it's early in the morning. That's when I do most of my work. I like to try and get in an hour and a half in the studio in the morning, first thing before I go to work. Because by the time I get home from work, I just don't get anything done. But first thing in the morning, it's quiet, it's peaceful, it's just really a great way to start the day, and then you always kind of feel like, well, you got that done, And so that's where pretty much most of these books were made. This is a book that's called Sail Away, and it, again, is a magnet book. So this is because of coming back and forth over to Bainbridge to go to the gallery, to come to the museum. So there's a map of Seattle on one side, there's a map of Bainbridge on the other. And again, a lot of these little nautical things, they really do relate back to doing scrimshaw. It's because we were always doing orcas and things like that. So in this case, the magnetic option that you have is for the ferry boat to move around, and it can just, go back and forth, go crazy. When I first did this book, I only put one magnet on the back of the boat, and it was really bad because you try to move it and the boat would just go down. I mean, just down. No, that'll never work. You have to figure this out, because a lot of times too, when I'm working, things that you think will work, you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, oh, that'll work. And then you do it and it doesn't work. And you have to figure something else out, But anyway, so this was just use two magnets. It was a pretty simple tool. But again, it's that same custom frame that I've made down from the frame chopper, and then it has some little nautical charms as well. Yeah, I do. I'll cut a little hole in the back of the board and just sew it on, and then glue it in and fill that, and then you cover it. So it doesn't stick up. It gives you a nice flat surface. Oh, sorry. Back here underneath the map, but because the bookboard is thick enough that anytime you do an emboss, or it's the same kind of thing, and then you can just tie it off, and you don't see it, but it's it's just sewn in there. Just a couple more that I'll show you if you're still up for it. This was from, I think, the last show I was in over at the art project, the gallery, and this was a show on celestial navigation. And so this book is called Vault of Heaven. It was really fun to research comets when I did this book, because there are all these different ideas about what comets were and where they came from, and so this one comet is on a magnet. This little illustration here is based on a Flammarion illustration from the 17th century, I think, of a person who's breaking through and able to see beyond, into the night sky, into the new dimension. And again, this is more of just an interactive, almost kind of a toy. One thing that I did get hip to was that if you're going to do the magnets, the first few that I did, I just had the magnet on the back. Well, that's kind of a problem if the magnet gets lost or whatever. So now I've done these little kind of border that gives it a protection, so that there's room for this to move and not, oops, see what I mean? And not fall off, hopefully. And here we go. There we go. And then last but not least, I'll show a book that I did for a show that Cynthia curated called Carpe Librum, which was one of my favorite shows that I've ever been in. And this book was one of my favorite books, actually, that I ever had worked on. I was about halfway through doing a Latin alphabet when I got your letter that said, we're going to do this show. And it's Carpe Librum, and so you start thinking about what would I put in it if I was going to do this show. And I was like, I have half of a Latin alphabet. Why don't I just continue and do the Latin alphabet? Because I never was able to take Latin in school, but I always wished that I had, because I love words and word origins and all of those things. And so I was kind of trying to teach myself a little bit of Latin at home. So this book is called Latin 101, and it is a piano hinge book, which is the third binding that I mentioned that I learned from Mare. And this is a binding also that I learned from Mare, but it's this threefold panel for each page. And so each page has, it starts with the letter A, and it has a Latin phrase that is based on illuminated manuscripts, again, like I said. And then if you lift, they're just tipped in, so if you lift in, it has the Latin translation of what the phrase means on the back. But this book was so fun to do. I mean, I just, every morning when I would go in the studio, I'd be like, I don't want to go to work. I just want to stay here and do this. I just had the best time. So much fun. And that's what I really would encourage anybody that's interested in making books, have fun with it. So I'll pass this around so that you can see. It's an alphabet that goes all the way through. Then the thing I love about the piano hinge is that the hinge is held together with a pin, which comes out. So you can put a little surprise in the back. And so this is a little panel drawing of Saint Columba, who is the patron saint of bookbinders. So it's just a little homage to that saint. And it seemed appropriate to have it in a book of illuminated manuscripts. So that's one of the pluses of a piano hinge, is that you can put some kind of little element of surprise. Do you guys want to see the back? I'll just pass it without the pin, and then you can just take a look. So that's pretty much all that I have. I can show a couple of quick things. I don't know, how are we on time?
Good.
Are we okay on time? Yeah, questions. I have just a couple of things I'm working on.
Great.
If I
Great.
might just show a couple of quick things. I've been doing some blank books because you never know when you might have an opportunity to do a collaborative project with someone with a book. It's one of the most fun things that I've ever done is to work with other people. You come up with an idea, and you make the book, and then people give you their ideas, and you put them into the book, and then you usually give it as a gift to someone. And I think I think everybody has the desire to be seen, and everybody has the desire to. I think creativity is kind of hardwired into us. It's part of our DNA, no matter what you do for a living. And it's really fun to work with people who maybe don't think of themselves as artists, but you ask them to work with you on a project, and they suddenly light up and they start giving you all these great ideas. And so I've done a number of blank books that then have turned into something else. I don't have any of those to show, but I always like to keep a few little blank books in the studio just in case, because you never know what might come up. Or you're asked to be in a show and you might have something that you've got a starting point, but you haven't really fleshed it out yet, but it could be a receptacle for an idea for something like that. And I've done a few. Again, this is the magnet, a similar magnet theme, but this one is a map of Paris. It's just a trade publication, but it's got a number of movable objects here: biplane, dirigible, girl floating through the air with a book, and a hot air balloon. Just so you can kind of just make up your own story as far as what that might be. But I also mentioned my friend from the south of France, and she and I are working on a book together, and it's been a kind of a mail art project. She wrote me a letter, and it was in a really wonderfully illustrated kind of film noir envelope art. And so we've done this back and forth correspondence where on mine, I just have Xeroxes of mine because I sent her the art, but it has to pass through the mail. And so we've been just doing these back and forth, and I'm going to bind these into a book. I haven't quite figured out yet how. I will, but we like to kind of take little bits of one. She'll send me this, so then on the one that I send back to her, I use a little bit of her drawing on one of mine that goes back. She's a show-off. I got the ones that are in color, and I'm like, really? I thought we agreed to black and white. But she's just really prolific. This is one that I sent to her right after the terrorist attack in Paris, because everyone in France was saying, but we're not even afraid. You know, they refused to cower before the terrorists. And I don't usually do any kind of political thing, but that was just such a terrible scenario. Here's one that definitely is based on our Scrimshaw past. She also was one of the Scrimshaw artists that I mentioned. This was from her. And then on the back, she has this beautiful whale with a little tag down here that says, nautical but nice. So this is something, a collaborative project that I'm working on. Yeah, they went through the mail.
And all of them have arrived?
Yes,
As expected?
as expected. When we send it out, we'll like email, okay, be on the lookout, because she sent this black one and she was really worried about that because black won't show up the postmark, so we didn't know.
And really not in a protective envelope.
No, just through the mail. Fingers crossed. But it's been really fun. But I'm behind. I have to, it's my turn. It's like, tag, you're it. And she keeps saying, when are we going to finish this book? You know, come on, let's go. So anyway, open for questions or? Oh, thank you.
I'd like to ask a little more about the scratch board.
Uh-huh.
And describe it a little more.
Sure. What it is, it's like a board that's about 1/16 of an inch thick, and it's been inked with black ink, solid black ink. And then there's a tool, scratchboard tool, that you use, and you etch that ink away, and it leaves the white surface. And so I like it because it's possible to kind of put movement, you know, as opposed to if you're just, you can do it with pen and ink too, but it's the reverse of that, I guess. And like I said, I like it because it's really graphic, it's really clean. I've had a harder time finding, it seems like the quality of scratchboard that I used to work with was better than what I've been able to get lately again, and that's where I feel like I could become an art supply hoarder because you find something good and you're afraid you won't find it again, so how much should I buy, you know? But it's a pretty forgiving medium too. You can touch it up with ink.
Do you buy the scratchboard that comes with, that's already coated with the black, or
Yeah.
do you buy the white and coat it?
No, I don't coat it myself. I just buy it where it's already coated, you know.
Who sells a good product of that one?
Well, Dan Smith is where I always used to get it, but I love Dan Smith, and I worked there for a while. I know Dan, and I'm not bad-mouthing them, but the last batch that I bought there was just not what I was used to. It was harder to get a clean line. It would chip away, and I'm cursing. And what, you know. So I don't know. I should probably look into maybe figuring out a way to ink my own, because that might be a good solution.
Dick Blick?
I think Blick carries it, too. I haven't bought it there. I'm sorry.
I wondered if Blick had a good board, but my daughter did one that is fabulous, and she did it ages ago, and she put that on, and I'm trying to remember what they actually put on the surface.
Uh-huh.
It's usually India.
But it was very black, and her drawing was more white. You know,
Yeah.
you saw the white, you didn't see a white into the black,
Mhm.
whereas yours are so white with the black, so that was so curious.
Yeah. I think that they do carry it at Dick Blick. I haven't bought it there. SD was the board that I've always used for years. ESDEE or ESSDEE. That's out of London, but I need to do a little more research into that to see if I can find.
How do you do, what is the coloring? How do you do the coloring?
That is acrylic, and it's just acrylic. Like I love golden acrylics. I got addicted to those when I worked for Dan Smith, because they carry them, and they have really nice vibrant colors. And then, like I said, I do the scratchboard, and then if I want something to stay white, just mask that out, and then I just airbrush the acrylic color right over the top. Yeah. And because the black, even if the acrylic goes over it, it doesn't really show. So it's pretty forgiving. It's a fun it's a fun medium to work on. Now I know we've got several book artists here. I mean, how many of you guys like make books yourself? Anyone? We have a quorum. That's great. Yeah. So I would just encourage anybody who's interested. It's for me such a fun medium, and I can't tell you how much it means to me to be able to share it with people. So thank you again for coming. Thank you.